Well, where has the time gone? We are now 29th of September and I'm back doing bees for the last 2 weeks. I had an amazing time away, having a break from doing some bees. I've come back, I've pulled another 30 supers, extracted that, the last treatments are in, the bees have been moved around, things like that. Just loads going on, and then I apologise I haven't done any posts for that time because it's just absolutely crazy. So what are we doing now? Well, to be honest, there's not much more to do for the time being. I'm going around feeding. One of the things I said I really was going on about last year, and it's the same this year, is don't ever think that not feeding now and waiting for the ivy flow, especially in the UK, Northern Europe, I'm not sure about other places, obviously there's ivy in all over the world, but we benefit from it here for our bees in this specific area a lot. And whatever you're doing, whatever flow you have, never wait for the flow if it's the last flow. Always assume it's not going to come, and use that flow when it does come, if it does materialize, as a way of just topping up your hives. Because here I've found last winter that hives that tend to eat more food, there's two things about that. One, you can say, fine, let's get loads of food into them earlier in the autumn, and there's no doubt that trying to get feed in them later in the year is a nightmare because they don't take it up, and then you're into candy, then you're into more expense. So for me personally, my interest, I can't do anything but preach about getting autumn feed right and weighing your hives. Mike Palmer's just released a really good video on how to weigh your hives, and if you follow that, there's nothing else you need to do, because it's exactly bang on the money. I mean, I followed that years ago, and this video he's just done is actually like a new and better video of what he used to talk about before. It really does explain everything. Getting back to here, I was saying last year that no matter how much you go on about waiting for your flow and preparing the bees, if it's the last flow of the year and you're relying on it, make sure you get as much feed as you think is necessary into those colonies before the flow comes, and then everything else is just a bonus. This year also we had such a huge dearth here, right from mid-July, well, early to mid-July when our nectar flow finished, right through till probably a week ago, 2 weeks ago. There was the odd bit of pollen, but I took the stance and I fed all my poly nukes and all my vulnerable hives, and also hives that were, for example, breeder queens, anything that was possibly going to be vulnerable. I couldn't organize and get in place feeding all my production hives, but they did have stores of some pollen and obviously more sugar, in other words nectar, honey that was cured from the summer. So in that respect they didn't really matter so much, but when I was going around removing honey, checking for brood diseases, as I do as a very brief inspection every time I was pulling the supers off, so I wasn't leave anything to be robbed at if it died. As I was going to do that, I was checking, and every hive was generally okay. Some I did feed, probably 20% I had to feed. So 20% of my production hives I had to feed, and as I was going around getting my treatments in after I'd pulled the honey, I was taking feed with me and soup and feeder shells and giving them if they needed it. I'm going around doing the same now, removing treatments. I'm feeding if they need it, but production hives are different. It's the nukes you really have to watch, and the nukes are the ones you want to pack full, absolutely pack full. So my nukes, I fed them all with Ultra Bee, and I mixed it up with my drill. I think you might have seen me mixing that up in one of my previous videos, but one. It all went out. They had a good 1.5 to 2 pound each, and the whole lot has gone. So it was a good gamble. Other years here, we have a rainy summer. Not for the last 2 years, but maybe 3 years ago, we had a rainy summer. And the bees didn't really need so much, but this year I think it's a good gamble, and boy am I seeing the results. I got frames of brood in all my nukes. My late nukes I made have all mated, and I'm sure that's because there was proteins available for those queens when they're out mating. And the thing is, I mixed honey in with my Bee Pro my Ultra Bee that I used, And because I mixed Ultra B, and because it was moist, and because I put some, I used actually oilseed rape. I bought a bottle of oilseed rape oil that was a bio one. It cost about £5, but it's worth it. And that actually coats every particle inside the Ultra B with a little fragment, tiny bit of oil, and it helps it keep moisture before it dries out. And then I obviously put it between paper, and you don't need to score the whole thing. They'll eat it from one end to the other, or wherever they need to. So what I did was put that on the hive, squash it around flat, put an econ, and then I fed also at the same time, so I could put literally 2 pieces on either side of the round feeder I use, and they took the whole lot up. Everything has gone. It's absolutely fantastic. So I learned a big lesson this year that it is possible, and you can give your nukes the maximum feed. I made the last ones up strong, and it's really, really helped. So I've got nukes now that are going into the winter with plenty of brood. They're going into the autumn, should I say. We have got a good 5 weeks of brood rearing still left, to be honest. And our season here in North Brittany does basically carry on till about the second week of November. So we've got all of October when they will be in and out feeding on ivy, and usually there'll be plenty of extra food. The hives will get heavier, but the emphasis is on getting some forager bees up and running in those nukes, ready to take benefit of that flow. And when you've got that volume, the hive is filled quickly, they can build quickly. It's a win-win situation. You never have a period where they're kind of floundering. And also it's knowing when to stop making nukes. I made my last 2 up last week, but I made them I actually split colonies in half. So I left the queen in place in a nuke from a hive. It's because I had a couple of queens to use up that I wanted to use up, and that's what I've done. But you have to be absolutely regimental in the way that you deal with your bees this time of the year. They all get fed regardless, and surprisingly they've all taken it up, and I was so surprised to see that Ultra Bee being devoured like it was. It was absolutely fantastic. So for me, that was the bonus, that was a good move for me, I feel, because I'm looking at the colonies now. The queens are gentle, they're well fed during mating. The colonies are built up well, and those were the queens I showed you going in, and my last queens I made in the incubator. So that was over a month ago. They went in, I think, 4 weeks ago. They were mated within a week because I'd actually banked most of those late ones, and they really got out and mated quickly, and we had perfect weather for the last mating. So it was all a combination of things coming together really well. People have been asking me as well about my Ultra Bee I've been using, and I've done a bit of digging, and I've been looking at the makeup of it very, very lightly. And looking at the possibility of making my own. Now, it is possible, but the problem is getting all the ingredients is difficult. You have to weigh up the pros and cons, and to be honest, it's such a good bee food, and it's recommended to be one of the best that I mean, from what I've seen from it, you can't do anything but use it. It's just fantastic. And I've never used it here in the 10 years I've been keeping bees, and I know that next year I'm going to see benefits from it, because I'm sure other bees that didn't have it will be that far behind, and take that longer to pick up now the flow's on. So it's just a win-win. You have to do that. I really feel that if you're serious about raising quality queens and raising quality nukes that are going to be in your hives as production hives next year, giving them a protein feed in the dearth, in your summer dirt, is only going to benefit them. So when a flow does come along, they're going to rock it, and they're going to overwinter better. They're going to feed better. The other reason I feel I want to get all my feeding done before November is not that I can't give them candy, because I can give them candy, but my logic with that is, if you're feeding candy from December, January, February to a nuke that should be fuller, the honey that it should have stored, okay, should have more trace elements in it than plain candy does. And I know I'm feeding a fructose syrup, okay? It's a really strong 10% water maximum in the fructose we give them. But I know I'm feeding them that, but they're at the same time, they're bringing in honey. So they're mixing what they're getting in with the fructose I give them. If you're just giving them, if your bees get a light in, say, January, February, and then you have to start giving them candy, you imagine they are only getting one source of sugar, and that ain't very good. They need the honey. So if you do have a light colony that you couldn't get any, or you couldn't get much nectar in, or you missed it, or it got, you know, you didn't basically get much in, you can give them candy, but you're better off giving it to them in November. Because at least then if they start taking it down, they're going to mix it and they're going to use it with what they've got in the colony, and it will kind of spread it over a while. So you're not just giving them on one source of really really single sugar at a time of year when they're going to think about building up. Because trace elements and feeding are so important, and I'm only starting to learn the best way to feed bees. This is so complicated, you know. Ian Stepler's doing some great work and some trials on his colonies, and everyone is now saying, my goodness me, this is something I never even considered that was so important. And it's like all animals, they need good food, they need balanced nutrition, they need minerals, they need vitamins. So I'm hoping that all my nukes, my mini nukes, will all be as full of nectar or full of honey, cured nectar, as I can get, but that nectar will be a mixture of the fructose I give them and their own sources, so that at least they're going to use the two, or the mixture of those two together, okay, throughout that winter. If I have to feed candy on any, it's for me it's an emergency feed. I don't want to be doing that. I want them to take any candy down with other feed. So my thought is, if you've got a light colony that you know isn't going to make it, give them candy as soon as possible so they can get on top, get it in and start using it, and they won't use up all their vitamins and minerals they've got that's stored in the honey. Just a thought, just the way I think I'm sure it works, and you'll end up with a better bee, a better colony the following spring, because it won't have had a single diet for a long time. And when I say vitamins and minerals, I do understand that most of the actual building blocks for bees to produce larvae does come from proteins and pollen. I completely understand that. But there is trace elements in honey, that's what I'm getting at. There's trace elements, there's some vitamins. It's everything you can give them and more, you know. It's all about giving them the widest diet possible. That's all I'm saying. And if you do it and you get it right, that's why bees overwinter well. So you get your mites down, you give them plenty of feed, they go into the winter with clean bees and plenty of stores. There's no reason why they won't survive well, no reason at all, despite the worst weather. So this is a classic example, the way I've been feeding my nukes. It's not rocket science. I've been giving pollen sub to each nuke, and you can see they're still finishing the last bit off. This is a little bit dry, that bit there, but they've nearly finished it all. And they're going through it, but this is still moister. I'll show you, I'll peel this back and you can see. Okay, you can see that there. You can actually see inside there, they're building comb. You can actually see down there, they're building comb there, which is a great thing to see, because that was a sheet of foundation. So I know they're bringing in syrup. This was empty 5 days ago. So this is being built, I know that. But you see, this is nice and moist still, and they'll be able to finish that. But the whole block, you can see the top of it where the stain was. I had a whole lump in. I had a big lump that I cut into two and put one lump here and one lump there. And then I fed in the middle. And all I do is I put my feeder above the frames. Okay? It's so simple. It's a direct way. It's just like Mike Palmer does when he puts his 1 gallon paint cans on top of his frames. I do it slightly differently because I have the hole in the plastic. For me, I feel it keeps them better. And this is my eek that we made that basically extends the hive. The feeder is enclosed inside. You can put pollen sub each end if you want. And sometimes I have a hole in the plastic this end, so the feeder goes further up, and then you can put a larger lump on top of the pollen sub this end. But it doesn't matter because they've nearly eaten it all. I mean, you can see it's nearly all gone. They're absolutely great. I just get this feeling by doing this, I just get this great feeling that the bees are really enjoying this extra nutrition, and they can do it when the weather's rough. You know, they don't have to wait. So this is the eeks we made. Simply goes on top like that. Seals the hive. We're going to use these in the spring now because these are new eeks we've made that go over the top. They actually fit directly over and they seal in. They're basically extending the hive. You can buy feeders for these polynukes, but I don't think they're as good. And the reason is, and I've talked about this before, is the heat doesn't travel up. So when I put this roof on that fits perfectly, that becomes sealed and enclosed. And the sugar warms up because it's on top of the frames. I don't need shims on mine here because the hole they feed through comes through here, okay? You can see from the hole, they come straight up there and they feed from there, you know? It's absolutely fine and it works really well. So I'll be able to feed with these in the spring. if they need it early, spring when it's a bit cold. I won't give them a lot, but I'll give them a little bit so that they can feed from that and everything will be great if they need it. But my whole emphasis is I'm getting enough feed in now while I can, while it's easy. I've said so many times about getting feed in and getting it in early enough so that it's done. You don't have to worry. There's that feed there until February, March time, and then in February, March, if they need a little bit of syrup, you can give it to them. But they should overwinter longer than that with what's in the colony. All you have to do is have a quick peek, see if they're on stores, just lift up the hive. My hives are universal now. I've got these ones I was showing you making putting in the fixing. So the inside here I've got a metal band that supports the frames. Now we have castellations in our hives, but I know that all these hives are universal in size and weight. So if I get a light hive, I can see pretty quick. Do you know what I mean? So it's good. And incidentally, when I do these in blocks, I have two entrances, two this side and two the other side. So it's pretty good. And there's no confusion with drifting. All these have got mated. I think I had 11 out of the 12 here mated. The other one over here, I've just put in one of my last queens that was in a cage. And you can see the wind, we've had a little bit of wind blown a couple of these off. See, this was our old eeks. These are just square bits of wood that were just put together and they do the job. You can see they've just still on the pollen sub here. Look at that, virtually all gone. Everything's been eaten. Out and see they're building wax there. Look, that's fantastic. So there's a month left. So I've got clean bees, they're well fed now, they're all ready to go into the winter, but they're still feeding, they're still topping up, and I'm going to make sure they're nice and heavy and everything will be completely great. And these actually will probably be moved. This is not their wintering space. I'll move these to another apiary because I've got a lot of bees here, as you can see. I've got over 50 mini nukes. I've got about 60 normal nukes. I've got production hives. I've got cell builders that are now obviously single story. There's just loads and loads to sort out, but it's virtually there. So that gives you some idea of the way I run my nukes and mini nukes. Just to show you this again, look, you can see the last of the pollen sub just being devoured. And I've got this syrup here, and it actually feels warm. You can see the bees, they're not taking it up too quickly, but they're still taking it up. And that's what they do. Because the syrup's warm, it's in contact with the frames, they just take it straight down, you know. This is a smaller colony, it's just had a new queen put in, so they are going to be a bit slower. But overall, it's a great way. It's so simple. Just be aware, if you buy the feeders that come with your pollen nukes, the feeders actually insulate the feed, so they're actually away from the cluster. Okay, in early autumn it's fine, because you do have warm weather still, you know, but come later in the year, if you're trying to get feed in, you're really on a hiding to nothing, you know, because the feed is cold. One cold night and the feed above the cluster gets cold. With this way, they stay warm and they take it down. It's a no-brainer. It's so simple, you know. So I've got a couple of breeder queens here for next year. This one on the left is a Marken queen, 2019, mated in about July, August. And I put to try pollen sub above in a feeder because I had put some feed in this side and I put the pollen sub in the above, but they haven't really touched it. But look how nice and moist it is still, okay? But I'll show you what I've done this side because I knew they probably wouldn't touch it, but I wanted to get some syrup in them because they're a bit low on syrup. So I gave them the syrup and put the pollen sub in the other side to see if they would take it up, which they haven't really. They've taken a little bit, but not much. But this side, okay, exactly the same time, I put in a feeder, but I've upturned it so it gets the pollen sub right above the cluster. Now let's see if I can just lift this off, and there we go. Look at that. This is a stoffen, and they've completely devoured almost all that pollen sub. You can see how much there was. That's the same amount here on this, so it's virtually all gone. So you can see how worthwhile it was doing that, and you can see how lovely these bees are. They're absolutely great, you know. And you can see how the pollen sub is still moist enough for them to take up. They're just finishing that off, which is great. So, you know, they've all calmed down now. See, you sometimes get this initial rush, but it's fun, you know, they're great bees, they're so prolific. This colony itself was actually in a nuke and I had to put it in a hive because it's too strong. So what I'm going to do though, is I'm going to transfer that pollen sub that's in that one. I'm going to flip over that feeder in a minute and put it on top of the colony like I've done with this one, and they all devour it all. It's almost like they're moving it out of the way. You give them that encouragement to move it, you know. You notice this is on 8 frames. on 7 frames, sorry. And the 7 frames, there's the partition. Next spring as they build, they're moving to that one, but it's really packed, this colony, and it's all looking great. They really filled it full of feed. The bees are absolutely lovely. That's got a bit dry, that bit, but the other stuff is moist, so I'll chuck that out. But overall, it works really well. Pollen sub, I think, is a really, really good thing to incorporate in your colonies. It just gives them that edge, you know. It's perfectly balanced to them. If they don't want it, they don't use it. But why are they taking it down? Why are they storing it? Why are they doing so well with it? That's the question. And obviously, it's a no-brainer.